Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel. Welcome to our deep dive into the Black Dahlia case.
Oh, okay.
It's a mystery that has haunted Hollywood
Yeah.
and true crime fans for over 75 years.
Absolutely.
We're going to unpack the facts, the theories, and try to understand why this case still fascinates us today.
Yeah.
So imagine 1947, Hollywood, all glitz and glamour,
Right.
but underneath a darkness that would soon shock the nation.
It's what's so compelling about this case is how it went beyond a simple murder. You know, it became a cultural phenomenon. The Black Dahlia murder is really a cornerstone of true crime.
Right.
And its shadow influences everything from books and movies to even how we view celebrity and the dark side of fame.
Right. And at the center of it all is Elizabeth Short, the woman who would become known as the Black Dahlia. You know, going through the source material, I was struck by how much emphasis was placed on her looks, you know, and her aspirations to be an actress. It's almost as if her identity was reduced,
Of course.
to this tragic image, forever frozen in time by the brutality of her murder.
That's the power of the media, especially in a case like this. The press was relentless, turning Elizabeth Short into the Black Dahlia, a name that's both evocative and tragic.
Right.
And the way her story was presented with graphic photos and sensationalized details, it definitely played a role in shaping public perception.
Yeah.
And may have even hindered the investigation.
It's like the media frenzy created this distorted reality around the case.
Sure.
It's hard to separate fact from fiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's try to bring it back to the facts.
Yes.
The crime scene itself was incredibly disturbing.
Yes.
Her body was discovered in a vacant lot, completely drained of blood, severed at the waist,
God.
and posed in a way that suggests a terrifying level of premeditation. What stood out to you about the crime scene details?
The brutality of the murder. And the precision of the cuts were truly shocking.
Yeah.
Even to seasoned investigators. The Glasgow smile, for example, wasn't just a random act of violence.
Right.
This specific mutilation has a history, often associated with gangs and organized crime, which suggests the killer may have had a background that informed this chilling act.
That's a detail I hadn't considered.
Yeah.
It's not just about the violence,
Right.
but the potential meaning behind it. It raises the question, was this a personal attack?
Right.
Or was Elizabeth Short caught in something much larger and that sinister?
And the fact that the murder likely didn't happen at the discovery site adds another layer of complexity. Whoever did this had the means and the forethought to transport her body, suggesting a level of planning that goes beyond a random act of rage. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime.
It makes you wonder about the killer's profile. Were they familiar with the area?
Right.
Did they have a connection to Hollywood?
Or the movie industry, given the way Elizabeth's body was almost staged like a scene from a film noir.
That's one of the enduring questions of this case.
Yeah.
And it leads us to the long list of suspects.
Right.
Each with their own connection to Hollywood, their own secrets and potential motives.
Let's talk about those suspects. The one that jumps out immediately is Dr. George Hodel.
Right.
This prominent Los Angeles physician whose own son, Steve, dedicated years to investigating him.
Wow.
What makes Dr. Hodel such a compelling suspect?
Well, first, there's the chilling quote from a wiretapped conversation.
Okay.
Where he allegedly says, supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they can't prove it now.
Ooh.
That's a pretty damning statement, even if it's open to interpretation.
Right, but it's not just the words.
Right.
It's the context. Hodel was a surgeon. He had the medical knowledge to perform the kind of precise cuts found on Elizabeth's body.
Right. And some have even argued that there's a disturbing parallel between his artistic style and the way her body was posed.
That artistic connection is fascinating.
Yeah.
Steve Hodel, based on his research, argues that his father's surrealist paintings bear a striking resemblance to the crime scene photos, suggesting a possible psychological link between the art and the act.
Yeah.
However, you have to be careful not to overinterpret such connections.
Of course. It's all about piecing together the puzzle and seeing which pieces fit.
Right.
But we can't just focus on Hodel.
Of course not, yeah.
There were other suspects,
Yeah.
What about the bellhop, Leslie Dillon?
Right.
His letters to the police seem to suggest he knew a lot more about the crime than he should have.
Dylan's letters are definitely creepy.
Yeah.
He provided details that weren't publicly available, claiming he was receiving visions about the murder.
Really?
Some believe this was a sign of guilt, a way of inserting himself into the investigation.
It's almost like he wanted to be caught.
Right.
Like he was playing a twisted game with the police.
It's possible he was simply seeking attention.
Right.
Or had a morbid fascination with the case.
Yeah.
But the letters do raise questions about how he could have known certain details unless he was somehow involved.
So we have Hodel with his medical knowledge and chilling statement.
Right.
And Dylan with his eerie letters and inside information.
Yeah.
Both with connections to Hollywood, both shrouded in suspicion.
Right.
It's like something out of a classic film noir.
Yeah.
Where everyone has a secret and no one can be trusted.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have over 500 confessions to sift through.
Wow.
Theories about Hollywood cover-ups.
Yeah.
And even the possibility that Elizabeth Short was the victim of a serial killer.
Right.
It's a web of intrigue, speculation, and tragedy.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We have a victim, a gruesome crime scene, and a cast of characters worthy of a Hollywood thriller.
Definitely.
But the question remains, who killed Elizabeth Short?
Right.
And why?
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Black Dahlia case. You know, as we delve deeper into the suspects and theories, it's important to remember that this was 1947. Forensic science was nowhere near as advanced as it is today.
Right.
DNA testing didn't exist.
Yeah.
So investigators relied heavily on eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and good old-fashioned detective work.
It's amazing to think how much we rely on technology now to solve crimes. Back then, it was all about connecting the dots, following hunches, and sometimes just plain luck. Speaking of hunches, let's go back to Dr. George Hodel.
Okay.
His son, Steve, was convinced of his guilt.
Right.
Even writing a book about it.
Right.
What were some of the key pieces of evidence that Steve Hodel presented?
Steve Hodel's investigation into his father is fascinating. He claims that his father's handwriting matches that of the mysterious letters sent to the police and the press.
Okay.
And he points to potential connections between his father and known associates of Elizabeth Short.
Right.
But what really struck me was his analysis of his father's artwork, particularly the surrealist pieces that depict dismembered female forms.
Yeah.
It's a chilling parallel, especially when you consider the brutality of the Black Dahlia murder.
So we have a possible confession, handwriting analysis, potential connections to the victim, and now this unsettling artistic link.
Yeah.
It's starting to feel like a lot of circumstantial evidence piling up against Dr. Hodel. But was there anything concrete, anything that directly linked him to the crime scene or to Elizabeth Short?
That's where things get tricky. There was never a smoking gun in the Hodel case. No fingerprints, no DNA, no direct witnesses. Yeah. Some have argued that the lack of physical evidence is a sign of a skilled and meticulous killer, someone who knew how to cover their tracks, especially someone with medical knowledge.
Like a classic whodunit, where the most likely suspect seems to have the means and the opportunity, but the definitive proof remains elusive.
Right.
But you mentioned that forensic science was limited back then.
Right.
Has any of the evidence been re-examined using modern technology?
Yeah.
Could DNA testing finally crack this case wide open?
There have been attempts to re-examine evidence, but the passage of time and the way the original investigation was handled have made it incredibly challenging. Some items were lost, others were contaminated.
Oh, wow.
And even with advancements in DNA technology, you need viable samples to make a match.
It's so frustrating to think that the answers might be out there, locked away in degraded evidence or lost files. Yeah. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about Leslie Dillon. His letters to the police were undeniably creepy.
Right.
But did they ever lead to any concrete evidence linking him to the murder?
Dillon was a fascinating character. He worked as a bellhop and had a background as a mortician's assistant.
Oh, wow.
Which gave him a certain familiarity with death and dismemberment.
Yeah.
His letters to the police were full of strange details, claiming he was receiving visions about the murder. He even mentioned a specific location, a sewer drain, where he believed evidence might be found.
Did they ever find anything at that location?
The police did investigate the sewer drain that Dillon mentioned, but they didn't find anything conclusive. It's unclear whether he genuinely believed he was having visions, or if he was deliberately trying to mislead investigators.
It's a strange detail, though. Why focus on a sewer drain?
Right.
Was he trying to plant a false lead?
Yeah.
Or was there something more to it? Did the investigators ever consider that Dylan might have been involved in the crime itself?
Right.
Perhaps as an accomplice or someone who helped dispose of the body?
There were definitely suspicions about Dylan's potential involvement.
Okay.
Some investigators believed he might have been the one who wrote the ransom note, which was never definitively linked to any of the suspects.
So we have two primary suspects, both with ties to Hollywood.
Right.
Both with unsettling backstories, and both leaving behind a trail of clues that are as intriguing as they are inconclusive. It's enough to make your head spin. But we also have to consider the theory that Elizabeth Short might have been the victim of a serial killer. What evidence supports that theory?
The possibility of a serial killer is always a consideration in cases like this, especially when you have a brutal and seemingly motiveless crime.
Right.
The similarities to the Cleveland torso murders, which took place a decade earlier, are striking.
Okay.
Both involved victims who were dismembered, often with similar precision,
Yeah.
and both cases remained unsolved.
Is there any evidence to suggest a link between the two cases, like a specific murder weapon or a signature that connects them?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
The investigations into both the Black Dahlia case and the Cleveland torso murders were hampered by limitations in forensic technology. And communication between law enforcement agencies. There's no direct evidence to connect them, but the similarities in the victims and the brutality of the crimes have fueled speculation for decades.
It's a chilling thought to think that a killer might have been operating across state lines, leaving a trail of victims in their wake.
Right.
But without concrete evidence, it remains a theory. A shadow lurking at the edges of this already complex case.
Exactly. And this is where we have to be careful not to get lost in the speculation.
Yeah.
We have to constantly remind ourselves to stick to the facts, to examine the evidence objectively, and to avoid jumping to conclusions.
You're right. It's easy to get swept up in the intrigue and the mystery of it all.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we're talking about a real person, a young woman whose life was tragically cut short.
Absolutely.
And while we may never know for sure who killed Elizabeth Short, we owe it to her to keep searching for the truth.
Absolutely. And perhaps that's the most important takeaway from this deep dive. The Black Dahlia case is a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, the pursuit of justice should never cease.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive, exploring the evidence, the suspects, and the theories that continue to swirl around this case. But there's one final aspect we need to address.
Okay.
The enduring legacy of the Black Dahlia. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent this episode wading through the murky waters of the Black Dahlia case, examining the suspects, the theories, and the frustrating lack of a definitive answer.
And yet, despite the lack of resolution, this case continues to hold a powerful grip on our collective imagination.
Exactly. It's been over 75 years.
I know.
And we're still talking about it, theorizing about it, even making movies about it. Why do you think that is? What is it about the Black Dahlia case that continues to fascinate us?
It's a complex question, but I think there are a few key factors at play. First, there's the sheer brutality of the crime. The way Elizabeth Short was murdered and the staging of her body were so shocking, so meticulously planned that it tapped into our primal fears and our morbid curiosity.
It's almost like we can't look away, even though it's terrifying.
That's the nature of true crime, isn't it? It forces us to confront the darkness that exists in the world, the potential for violence and cruelty that lurks beneath the surface of everyday life.
And this case in particular seems to blur the lines between reality and fiction.
Totally.
It happened in Hollywood, a place already steeped in illusion and fantasy. You have aspiring actresses, shady doctors, and a media frenzy that turned a real person into a myth. It's like something out of a film noir.
That connection to Hollywood is definitely a big part of the enduring fascination. The Black Dahlia case became a cautionary tale about the dark side of fame, the dangers that lurked beneath the glitz and glamour of the movie industry.
It's a reminder that even in the land of dreams, nightmares can come true.
Totally. And I think there's another element at play here. The unsolved nature of the case. The fact that we don't have a definitive answer, a clear resolution, leaves a void that we as humans are naturally compelled to fill. We create theories, we speculate, we try to piece together the puzzle, even if some pieces are missing.
It's almost like a psychological itch that we can't scratch.
Exactly. And the Black Dahlia case, with its abundance of suspects, its tantalizing clues, and its lack of a clear resolution, provides the perfect breeding ground for that kind of endless speculation.
It's like a Rorschach test for true crime enthusiasts.
Right.
We all see something different in the evidence.
Right.
And we all have our own theories about what happened.
And then that's part of what keeps the case alive.
Yeah.
Even decades later, we keep searching for answers, re-examining the evidence, hoping that one day we'll finally crack the code and uncover the truth about what happened to Elizabeth Short.
But even if we never find those answers, even if the Black Dahlia case remains a mystery, I think there are still valuable lessons to be learned.
I agree. This case reminds us of the importance of vigilance, of protecting the vulnerable, and of never giving up on the pursuit of justice, even in the face of overwhelming odds.
It also makes you appreciate how far forensic science has come.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine if this case happened today. With all the technology and resources we have now, it's likely it wouldn't have remained unsolved for so long.
That's a good point. But it also makes you wonder about all the other unsolved cases out there.
Right.
The victims who never received justice.
Right.
The families who are still searching for answers.
It's a sobering thought, but perhaps the Black Dahlia case, with its enduring mystery and its continued hold on our imagination, can serve as a reminder to keep fighting for those victims, to keep searching for the truth, and to never forget the human cost of unsolved crimes.
Well said. The Black Dahlia may have faded into history, but her story continues to resonate, reminding us of the fragility of life, the enduring power of mystery, and the importance of seeking justice for all.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Black Dahlia case.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
We hope this exploration has shed some light on this enduring mystery and prompted you to consider its broader implications. And of course, please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel.